Also, I might possibly be in a manic state right now, so this is gonna be fun. Hi, thank you for clicking on the video, and I hope everyone is doing really well. I'm sure you can tell exactly what this video is going to be about just from the title, but as a recovering or former anorexic, I'm going to be explaining anorexia today. And I decided on this topic and this approach to this topic because I feel as though much of the time when you Google anorexia or you read a book talking about anorexia, much of the time it's just bullet point after bullet point saying, here are the symptoms and the warning signs, here's what to look out for, here's some of the behavior of anorexics, but that's about as deep as those sources get. And I want to talk about what it's like inside your head when you're anorexic. I have struggled with not just anorexia, but several different types of eating disorders for a collective total of about 21 years of my life. Most of that was anorexia. It started when I was 3, and I've lived with it since then through now. This is a video that I have done no planning. When I think of what anorexia is, the first thing that comes to mind is it is something that it is not something that an anorexic or I just do. It's something that I have to do. Our brain rewires itself to think this is something I must do. I have no other option. I have to act a certain way. I have to eat a certain way. I have to be a certain way, and that certain way is anorexic. It takes on a life of its own. It becomes our identity. It becomes who we are. It takes over all aspects of our life. One thing people really forget about is the fact that anorexia is more than just a food issue. It is more than just a fear of getting fat issue. It dives so deep inside the person's core that it is the person. And that is the big, I don't want to say misconception, but I think that's the biggest mistake people make when they think they understand what anorexia is all about. When people hear the word anorexic, I'm sure what they hear is, oh, that person doesn't eat. That person just starves themselves. That person never eats. And I think that last one is the biggest falsehood about anorexia. Anorexics eat. We eat food. We do. It's just we limit it ridiculously. It's more than just restricting. It's deciding that all food except for 2 things, 3 things, very small number of things are safe and are okay to eat. Everything else is bad, evil, out to get us. Anorexia is constantly being stuck in your own head. It is having your brain run a mile a minute, going through every scenario of what bad thing can happen if you do not live this way. It is to the point of almost OCD where we are convinced something bad is going to happen to not just us, but in general, just something bad is on the brink, on the horizon of happening if I do not only eat 200 calories today. The world will end. And that is overly dramatic, that's melodramatic to say the least, but that is how a lot of our brains start to work. It's a desire to control the cause and effect of our lives. We believe we cause bad things. Why? We all have different reasons why. A lot of the time it is caused by trauma, abuse, feeling out of control because of things that we have experienced. I think it all stems back to the initial cause is this is something that we have power over. We have power over ourselves. We are able to discipline ourselves And that gives us something to have pride in. I think for a lot of people who turn to an eating disorder or develop an eating disorder, lack a sense of self-pride. And I think for a lot of us, and this is my experience, I think a lot of us have been raised or taught to believe that self-pride is equal to selfishness, and selfishness is bad, and you should not be selfish. It should be about everybody else. You come last, and that translates into taking care of ourselves. We are last on our list, so we are going to feed everybody else, and then we'll feed ourselves if there's time, if there's anything left, but everyone else comes first, because we, for some reason, do not deserve to come first in our own lives. And that's not to say that other people shouldn't come first. It's admirable to put others first, but if you're not taking care of yourself, and if you're not feeding yourself and nourishing yourself and keeping yourself alive, you are breaking yourself down and making yourself incapable of helping other people. I am so sorry that this video is just all over the place, but honestly, that is how my brain is working. It is just jumping all over the place. Our brain reformulates itself to work the wrong way and to not work normally, so that our brain is just going all over the place, thinking about food in a million different scenarios, a million different ways, and just not giving us a chance to breathe. It's not giving us a chance to just have a break from being trapped. We're trapped in our own head. Because eating disorders are a mental disorder, you have to face the eating disorder as what it is, mental. It's a mental issue. That means that you have to go inside your own head. Unfortunately, for people with an eating disorder, they're already trapped inside their head. So asking them to face themselves inside their mental state of being is like the most terrifying, close to impossible thing you could possibly ask them to do. But it's the thing that they have to do. You have to face the eating disorder as what it is. You have to face it at face value. What truly is it at its core? And it's a mental issue. People just see it as a physical issue. The starvation, the eating, that's what people see, because that's the behavior of that person. There's so much more. I think the eating is maybe 20% of what anorexia is about, and the other 80% is all up here. It's all trapped inside your brain. You're trapped inside your brain screaming, but on the outside you are silent. No one can hear you screaming because it's all jumbled up, and you are hidden behind layers and layers of fakeness and facade and pretending. And that is anorexia in a nutshell. It's hiding behind something that isn't you, but you have been conditioned, you have been convinced that this thing is you. This is your defining factor. This is your characteristic. Anorexia is you, and you have lost sight of who you really are. Anorexia is being taken over by this thing, and you are tossed aside and made even less important than you were before. The other thing I want to talk about, that when I think of the word anorexia, or I think back to my anorexic days, something that people ask me now is, well, weren't you hungry? You weren't eating. I've been anorexic for nearly 21 years. I have taught my body how to survive on nothing. I have taught my body how to survive on very little. So was I hungry? No, my metabolism was running like a quarter of a mile every 3 days. Like, it was that slow. So I could burn through food super, super slow because I slowed my metabolism down so much. So I could just my body was just used to it. So of course I never felt hungry. Even when I was deep, deep, deep in my anorexia, like sickly, sickly deep into it, looking back, I cannot remember feeling hunger ever. I, like, when I first started recovery, I couldn't tell you what hunger tastes, or I couldn't tell you what hunger felt like. I just couldn't remember. And even now I struggle with, what does hunger feel like? Because there's this snap to reality, snap back to those days. So to answer people when they ask me, I'm like, I never felt hungry. And most people who have never been anorexic or had an eating disorder, they can't fathom what that would feel like or be like. There are all these symptoms of an eating disorder. There's, your hair falling out. There's growing this like fuzzy peach fuzz all over your skin, which that never occurred with me. There's discoloration to your skin, your nails. You get the sunken cheeks, you get the sunken under the eyes, you get the dark circles around your eyes. There are all these physical symptoms of anorexia. Looking back, I can recognize some of them that happened with me, and I'm sure a lot of them happened because of how malnourished I was. But I just, in the moment, I didn't recognize those physical signs, which is why I think when you Google anorexia and they just give you like, here's the list of things to look out for, if you're knee deep or if you're stuck in an eating disorder, if you're stuck in it, I don't think most people it doesn't even register. It doesn't even come across their radar that these things are happening to them. And so to say anorexia is a list of symptoms or a list of warning signs is totally false. Anorexia is first and foremost within the person's mind, the sufferer's mind. That's it. It is something that is inside their head, and you can't pull that out of the person's brain, put it on a piece of paper and say, there it is, that's what it is, because we're all different. There are similarities, there are corresponding factors that are similar across different cases, but at the end of the day, it's a mental disorder that everybody expresses or experiences differently. It can be, some people who are anorexic never show behavioral symptoms. They never starve themselves, but they are still anorexic because of the mental part. It's about the thoughts that you have and the way those thoughts either become obsessive or they become overpowering. It's about how those thoughts translate into behavior or how they don't translate into behavior. It's about those thoughts and how we choose as individuals to handle them. It all comes back down to a choice. It feels as though we have no other choice. We have to do this thing. But the thing is, maybe in that moment, in those moments, in those years of struggle, we felt as though we had no choice. Recovery is about realizing that you have a choice to walk away. That made some sense to me, so hopefully it made a little sense to you. I think I'm gonna end it there, because if I don't, I am just gonna keep going and make less and less sense. Anyway, if you did like this video, please give it a thumbs up. For more videos about eating disorders, eating disorder recovery, diets and nutrition, and those videos will hopefully, fingers crossed, be more organized, well-paced, and not so all over the place. Please subscribe, and I will see you next time. Bye!